Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glick. If this is your first time joining us, each week when you tune in, you'll hear one of two different types of shows. Sometimes when you tune in, you're going to hear an interview-style show where we have on someone associated with the land development industry. We learn more about their origin story, and then we dig into some industry-related topics. Other times when you tune in, we're going to have industry news. That's where we pull up a few different headlines, and we talk about what it means for the industry. Now, today we have industry news, and joining me as always is Charles Covey. Charles, how's it going?
It's good. Good to be here.
Well, there's a lot of action happening. I mean, especially with the tariffs and everything. It's been a little bit of a whirlwind last several days with not just, our industry, but just the markets in general and everything. So that's definitely going to be one of the big things we're going to dig into here today. But first, a couple housekeeping items. So for those of you who may be new to the show, or those of you who have been listening for a while but haven't yet connected with us on social media, just a reminder that on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube, you can find us at the Land Development Podcast. So I'd encourage you, if you're on those platforms, to head over there, like our page, follow our page. That's where we post a lot of clips from the show and any behind the scenes content that we might have. And then we're also on TikTok at Land Development Podcast. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is that I have quite a few people reach out to me related to the show, whether to talk about or ask a question about a prior guest or a topic that was covered. And so I thought it would be interesting to create an online community on LinkedIn. I know not all of you are on LinkedIn necessarily, but that was the easiest place to create this. So I created a group on LinkedIn called the Land Development Podcast Community. And it's a private group, and I am the gatekeeper of it. So if that's something of interest where you want to join that group and have some conversation about land development and the industry in general, go ahead and search that up on LinkedIn and submit a request to join. Once I can, I'll take a look at it and approve it and get you in there, and you can take part in the conversations. It was just created, so we have a very small number of people in there. Not a lot of conversation happening yet, but that will change here over time. All right, with that said, we've got a new segment today to start the show, and this segment is from the comments. So as Charles and I were talking, we thought it would be interesting and fun to go through some of the comments, the good and the bad, that we get on social media, because obviously there's a lot of keyboard warriors out there who will say pretty much anything to you, and why not highlight some of those comments on here, even the ones that take a jab at us. So first one here is, this one comes from a comment on TikTok. And I think this was related to, it had to be related to you, Charles, not me. So this one is Jack_Ventimiglia. Why are you guys qualified to talk about this? Who are you? Why does everyone think they should start a podcast?
I love this. No, he's right. We're unqualified. I definitely haven't been doing this for 27 years. And I definitely don't know what I'm talking about. So appreciate that, Jack.
Yes, that's funny. All right, next one also comes from TikTok. And this one was a response on a clip that we put out there related to some of the activity happening in the legislature in Texas. And I think specifically he had a problem with the one of the bills that was going to have a third party do the approvals for site plans in cities. And so this one comes from Zach54473. And his comment is, this is possibly the worst thing that can happen. Private companies involved in development is ripe for corruption and taking advantage of citizens.
Mm-hmm. I love this because it's completely the opposite of the thing that typically happens. So as an economist, we study all these charts and graphs and supply and demand and consumer behavior and why all these things happen. What's beautiful about the free market system is that when you pull things out of the bureaucracy of cities and counties and you allow the free market to take control, if somebody does a bad job on a project, they won't do it again because nobody will buy the damn thing. And it solves itself very easily. And when you allow municipalities and counties to tie this thing up in their bureaucracy, that's what hurts the consumer because it makes the cost of housing higher. So I think this is interesting. This is a very common misconception, and we see this a lot. People just they don't generally understand how this works and how much benefit there is to the consumer for privatizing most things. And I think there's a massive push in our government right now to privatize more things, get things out of the hands of government because of how inefficient and how problematic that is, and how much actual corruption happens in the government. So anyway, I think it's a little misguided, but I think it's interesting to see. This is a very common misconception.
Yep. All right. Well, let's do a positive one here to end this. So this one comes from YouTube, and it's from Nick Roberts X3S. You guys are awesome. I've truly enjoyed listening to your show. I'm now going back through and listening again and thought it was worth commenting. I appreciate the time and insight you both continue to provide. I swear I didn't do this one. This isn't me, like an alter ego online that just wanted to give us props. But Nick,
I don't know Nick, but I appreciate Nick. I appreciate him for making the comment. That's great.
Absolutely.
Makes me feel good.
It's nice. It's nice to get that feedback loop, right? So we put the content out there, and good or bad, I like to see the comments. So for those of you listening, hey, leave us a comment wherever you're at on social, and maybe it'll be spotlighted here on the show.
Yep, it's great.
All right, well, let's get into our topics for today. Before getting into the first article, I just wanted to give an update since Realtor.com just released their March housing market update. And again, this is going to be based on existing home inventory. This isn't necessarily new construction. So I know we want to highlight new construction, but that data is not out as of the time of this recording for the month of March. So keep that in mind as I read through some of these bullet points from Realtor.com related to the existing home market and the update here. So reading some of the highlights here from it. First one, pending home sales. Homes under contract fell 5.2% in major metro areas as still high mortgage rates and financial uncertainty weighed on buyers. The inventory of homes for sale rose 28.5% year over year, marking the 17th consecutive month of inventory growth. The total number of unsold homes, including those under contract, was up 17.3% compared to last year. New home listings increased 10.2% from a year ago, the highest March level in 3 years. The national median list price for homes was $424,900, unchanged from last year, while the price per square foot rose 1.3%, signaling modest home value growth. Homes spent a median of 53 days on market, 3 more than a year ago. And the last one here, 17.5% of listings saw price reductions, the highest share for any March since at least 2016. Any thoughts on this, Charles? Any of these?
Well, there's some context we have to set up because right now this is taking new homes and existing inventory and merging those together. So would love to get that broken apart because I think that would be a little more actionable data for us and for our listeners. We just don't have that. So maybe we'll dig a little bit and see if we can find that a source that will help us there for next time.
Yep.
But I think what we can see is that the inventory is increasing. And I think we can assume that a decent amount of that inventory is new homes. It appears that new home inventory is increasing. Not that that's all bad because it was low, but just something to watch, right? We don't want that. If we've got new home inventory increasing, that can signal a challenge for builders. So, and I'm sure anybody who's got new homes going in the ground is probably paying very close attention to that information. What we were wondering the last number of months was some of that pent up demand, like people that were holding off on making a purchase because they're thinking, okay, well, interest rates is going to drop another quarter point. I should wait. And maybe it was a springtime thing or, end of winter thing. Maybe the typical spring season of March, April, May will be busy. We just don't know yet because we haven't seen the March numbers. So I'm really curious to see if that's going to be notable. The seasonality could play a big part here, but I think generally it does appear that there could be a cooling in the marketplace. And so we want to watch this real closely and see, like, what do the numbers say? We don't want to just look up in 3 months and be like, oh crap, we have a big problem. So we'll pay close attention to this, and maybe this is a thing that we should do on a regular basis. Yeah,
sounds good. And I think part of the problem is similar to the data that the Fed uses to make some of its decision. A lot of this data is very lagging. Yeah. And so, we'll definitely dig into that and find a better source and try to have this data as a part of each of our episodes to keep everybody posted. All right, well, let's go ahead and get into the actual articles that we have for this. And the first one that we're going to dig into is the big topic of tariffs. So this article... the initial video here comes to us from Fox Business. China's tariff bombshell hits U.S. markets. This one comes from Stuart Barney. So we're going to play a quick video here. And then the plan for this particular segment and this topic of tariffs is to go through and show this video. It's just a couple minutes long. And then we're going to dig into the actual executive order that Trump put out there so we can all understand what it says. And then we'll dig into some of the numbers related to the tariffs and what other countries have imposed on the U.S. and then what the U.S. is now doing for to those other countries. And then finally, we'll finish it up with a few other inputs from people out there in the media and also some congressmen. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and we'll dig into this first video here. So again, this comes to us from Fox. And here we go.
Another bombshell, tariff bombshell, hit the market this morning. Thursday, stocks had their worst day since the pandemic lockdown in March 2020. Overnight, prices fell a little bit more. And then, at around 6 a.m. Eastern, Beijing announced its response to the tariffs that President Trump had imposed on them. China will put a 34% hit on all products coming from America. The market tumbled again. Here's where we are now. Dow's off 1,000, Nasdaq's down 458. For context, consider this. In 2023 and 2024, stocks went up roughly 20% in both years. So far in 25, we're down roughly 20%. So the bull market gains have not been entirely wiped out. Okay, but this is still white knuckle time. The economy is slowing and will probably slow further as the tariffs bite. Inflation remains at around the 3% level and may go up from there if tariffs are passed along to consumers. In other words, stagflation is a nasty word, but it is a possibility. Then think of profits, the baseline for stock prices. Chief financial officers are already marking down their expectations. That's never good for stocks. Consider the wealth effect. The rich take a hit when the market sells off. When you look at your diminished 401k, are you going to spend as freely as you did? If top earners cut spending, the whole economy slows. And what happens if some of our trading partners, other trading partners, join China in imposing stiff tariffs? A spreading trade war would not be good. There is one positive today, and that's the sharp decline in interest rates. The 10-year Treasury yields under 4%. That means mortgage rates will come down a little. The 2-year, that's coming in around 3.5%, 3.58 to be precise. As for oil, we showed you a moment ago, it has tumbled to the $61 level. That is a 4-year low. That means gas should be much cheaper soon, probably under $3 a gallon in many parts of the country.
All right, well, let's hear now from Trump's press secretary and then followed by former Commerce Secretary Carlos Gutierrez on Fox News. And let's hear what they have to say about the tariffs.
Countries wanted to negotiate. If these countries wanted to do what's right, they've had 70 years to do it. Instead, they have been ripping off American workers. He campaigned on the idea of fair trade, on tariffs, and nearly 80 million Americans elected him to do it, and he is delivering.
I would assume that this will not be in place in a month, 2 months, definitely not in the back half of the year. So I'm in the camp that this is the beginning of a big negotiation. The president has set the stage for what he loves to do. He'll be negotiating every single day for the foreseeable future.
All right, and one other video that I want to show here quick is from CNBC, and this one is related to some in Congress who are putting a bill together to oppose some of the tariffs and take over more control of them.
We've got 4 Republicans. They signed on to brand new legislation that gives Congress the power to approve or roll back tariffs. Senator Chuck Grassley, he introduced the bill, and he's now joined by Mitch McConnell, Lisa Murkowski, and Jerry Moran. And that bill could attract even more support. We've talked to senators like Mike Rounds and Tom Tillis. They say that they like the idea of Congress taking back some of its power over tariffs. And we now know that in the House, Don Bacon has confirmed to CNBC that he is planning to offer a similar bill. But Senator Ted Cruz actually warned on his podcast today that if tariffs remain in place for the next few months, the result could destroy jobs here at home and do real damage to the U.S. economy if we had tariffs everywhere.
Let's look at the executive order here. So this is what Trump signed, and the executive order title is Regulating Imports with a Reciprocal Tariff to rectify trade practices that contribute to large and persistent annual United States goods trade deficits. So I have some highlights from it here. So as a part of the executive order, it declared a national emergency. So the order declares a national emergency because persistent U.S. goods trade deficits attributed to unfair trade practices threaten both national security and the economy. U.S. trade partners are accused of using high tariffs and non-tariff barriers to gain an unfair advantage. For context, while the U.S. has one of the lowest average tariffs at 3.3%, some key partners charge much higher rates, such as Brazil at 11.2%, China 7.5%, European Union 5%, India 17%, and Vietnam 9.4%. An additional 10% ad valorem duty is imposed on all imports starting April 5th, 2025. So that would be just a few days ago. For countries listed in Annex 1, this rate will soon be increased to specific higher rates. So Annex 1 is a linkable, a link inside of the executive order that links to essentially a spreadsheet of the countries and the specific percentages. We're going to look at a few of those here in just a few minutes. Goods from Canada or Mexico that do not qualify as originating under USMCA will face an extra duty of 25%. However, for certain items like energy products or potash imported from Canada, if not qualifying under USMCA, the rate is lower at 10%. The measures aim to rebalance trade by addressing both tariff and non-tariff barriers, protect domestic manufacturing and supply chains, and ultimately strengthen U.S. national security. So like I just mentioned there, here's some of the tariffs that have been imposed on some of these other countries. And I think what's important here is just looking at the amount of money the amount of imports that the U.S. has from each of these different groups, and also the trade deficit. And I know some of these, Charles, when we were talking before we recorded here, these are some pretty big numbers as far as the trade deficit goes, with on top here, the EU, so European Union, 20% tariff imposed on them. They had $605.76 billion in U.S. imports and trade deficit of $235.57 billion. China, a 34% tariff imposed. We had $438.95 billion in 2024 imports, and the trade deficit is $295.40 billion. I'm not going to go through all of these. Those of you who are watching can actually see this on the screen, but also, as always, all the links to everything we show here is in the description down below. So click the show notes link, and you can see all of the links here to view all of these. Before I kind of continue forward here, Charles, I've been talking a lot about all of this, but do you have any initial thoughts from what I've said so far, just related to some of these trade deficits and the tariffs imposed?
I think the part that is getting missed oftentimes is how big the deficits were. I mean, these are crazy numbers, and we were allowing ourselves to get taken advantage of, I think, in a lot of ways, by allowing such a massive deficit to happen and not wielding the power that we have. So the crude example that I used earlier is that, Trump has decided that, hey, look at these deficits. We've been essentially getting beat up on, and that's not a position that we like to be in. And so we're going to whip our proverbial dick out and put it on the table and say, hey guys, did you forget? We're a monster here. We need you to recognize that we're not going to get pushed around anymore. And it's a negotiating tool, and that's what he loves to do. This is a guy that literally wrote the book on negotiating, and he enjoys this. And I think that's going to be a hallmark of his administration, is negotiating and making deals. And so from a deal making standpoint, when you slap a big tariff on somebody, now they're interested in talking much more so than they were beforehand. And to the point of the former Commerce Secretary in the video, these are not intended to be long-term tariffs. These are just, hey, we're willing to do this, and if you call our bluff, we absolutely will hold this in place. But you probably don't want to call our bluff. You probably want to come to the table and negotiate. And in the majority of cases, that's already happening. And so I think that's what we'll continue to see, is these things will play out over the next number of months. There'll be a ton of negotiating, and everybody in these positions, you got the ambassadors, and you got all the different people in the Department of Commerce and in Trump's cabinet. Everybody's going to be working to negotiate here. It's going to be a lot of back and forth, and it's going to be a bit of a wild time, because we're going to find all kinds of things to negotiate on. And I think it'll be very interesting. I'm going to make the assumption that the negotiations will be good and that they will go in our favor. But there's a lot of minutia at play, a lot of stuff going on. So there's all kinds of things about negotiating, buying our agricultural products and what that does for our farmers. And there's negotiating about buying other products. We'll buy this much steel from you, and you got to buy this much, corn from us. And there's all these kind of things that they can negotiate back and forth that will put us in a good position moving forward. So I think that overall it's absolutely phenomenal for the U.S. But everything's up in the air right now, and it's just an opportunity for the media to just grab at this because this is great for getting clicks and getting eyeballs on their content.
Well, speaking of the media, one of the big things that we've seen happen since the tariffs went into effect, or at least were announced, is the response from some of these nations, right? So they've really been pushing the response of what some of the nations have said related to this. So I have up here on the screen now, this is from Newsweek. So Newsweek has a nice little map on it that you can hover over each of the countries, and it will show you what that country region tariff is on the United States, and then what our reciprocal tariff is that was just imposed by Trump through this executive order. And then also if there's any response that has happened from that nation. So reading through a few of these here from our biggest, some of our biggest trade partners. So number one being China. So China currently has a country tariff or region tariff of 67%. That appears to be not on everything, but on certain types of goods. The U.S. has implemented a reciprocal tariff of 34%, and the response from China has been a 34% blanket tariff on all U.S. goods. So again, that must have been something where they didn't have it on everything, but the reciprocal tariff in this case, as you'll see with all the other cases, with the exception of the United Kingdom, is that they are usually about half of what the other country is imposing on the United States. So this next one, it says France, but this is really all of the European Union. Their region or country tariff is 39%. Our reciprocal tariff is 20%. And the response from the EU is they're currently drafting countermeasures. UK, 10% on us. We have a 10% on them. And it looks like the US and UK are pursuing some sort of trade deal. Taiwan has a country region tariff of 64%. Our reciprocal tariff is 32%. And also, it looks like they're pursuing a tariff exemption with the United States. India, 52% on us. Ours is 26% on them, and they're currently evaluating the tariff impact. A couple more here. South Korea, country region tariff of 50% on us. Our reciprocal tariff is 25%. Response from them is they're enacting support measures for South Korean economy. And then Vietnam has a 90% tariff on us. Our reciprocal tariff is 46%. No response yet from Vietnam. So as you can see with this, it's largely that the U.S. is not even matching a lot of these other countries' tariffs. So in most cases, it's really just half of what they're imposing on the United States. So I definitely get where Trump is coming from, but also what former Commerce Secretary Carlos Gutierrez said on Fox News, that it feels like it's more of a negotiating tactic showing these countries that, hey, we're not afraid to do this. Because I think if it was more of a long-term thing, and this is how we're going to operate into the future, and we're going to create everything here in the United States, I feel like it would be stronger. Like, I feel like he'd come out and just like match all of them and say, hey, if you're going to do this to us, we're going to do it to you. I feel like this is just easing it in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And the bills, like the Grassley bill and some of these other ones, I think mostly that's probably just positioning. They're probably just trying to. It's just an opportunity for them to get eyeballs. This is the most popular topic in the media, so it makes sense for them to be doing something to get some eyeballs. I don't think they have any delusion that their bill is going to go anywhere.
Agree. So this is obviously the biggest topic that we had to cover today. We have a couple other topics, but before I get into those, I did want to play really quick a short clip from President Reagan back on April 25, 1987, when he did a radio address, because this one has been going pretty viral. So anytime a certain topic becomes popular or mainstream, then people start looking back. What did former people, former presidents or former big political figures think of this particular topic? One that I saw that was popping up quite a bit was one by Rothbard. Would have been a big one that I've been seeing pop up on his take on it. And libertarians don't like tariffs, so that's something where he was opposed to it. But this one comes from President Reagan, and really setting the context for this is that the U.S. had recently imposed tariffs on Japan, and so there was a fear of a trade war and everything happening. And so this was really his address to kind of talk about his stance on tariffs in general. And so again, just wanted to play this for all of you in case you haven't heard it, because it is kind of interesting listening back to some historical comments.
Impose tariffs on foreign imports. It looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports.
So again, just wanted to show that there, just his stance on it. I still very much believe that this is a negotiation tactic. I think that like you said, Charles, and like we heard in the prior video, I do think that's what's going on. I don't think it's right that the other countries can have such high tariffs on us to dissuade our business from being able to export into other nations. I mean, if we want to be a free trade, if we want to have free trade here and around the world, and that's what we want to have, then I think the panic and people who are freaking out about this, I think it's misplaced, because they're solely focusing on the U.S. and saying, oh, the U.S. shouldn't do this. The U.S. shouldn't do this. And it's like, well, maybe nobody should do it. Why just focus so much on the U.S. and what Trump's doing? Why haven't we been paying attention to all these other tariffs that have been imposed on the United States, making it harder for our businesses to do business in other countries and compete with their local companies? We make it so easy, or historically have made it so easy for companies to come here from foreign countries and do business here, because the U.S., we're one of the biggest consumers. I think we are the biggest consumer in the entire, world, or at least one of the biggest consumers in the entire world. And so anyway, that's my stance on this. I don't think it's going to last forever. I think it's a negotiation tactic. And I think, and I'm hopeful that it's going to be something that ends up putting us in a better spot on the global scale than we are currently.
Yeah, I echo those words. I think that to be determined, right? If this doesn't play out well, so I'll just play devil's advocate for a second. If we don't end up at the negotiating table with the majority of these countries, yes, probably not a good thing. Probably not great for the economy. Long term, maybe it's okay, but short term, tough, very tough. If we don't have negotiations and reduced tariffs across the board before end of summer, I think it's a pretty dramatic negative impact to our economy. So let's just see how this plays out. We'll watch it very closely, but we do need action from all those involved in order to renegotiate, work on the deficit, but also allow trade to happen as it should.
This episode of the Land Development Podcast is brought to you by Groove. Proudly built and supported in America, Groove takes an America-first approach to business, listening to customers, building what matters, and delivering responsive, passionate service. If you need a tool or a better tool for identifying parcels to develop, organizing research, or tracking land deals over time, Groove was built with you in mind. It brings everything together on a single centralized map so your team stays aligned every step of the way. Start your free trial today at letsgroove.com/signup. That's letsgroov.com/signup. All right, let's get back to the show. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next article that we have here. I know we're already at 29 minutes, so we'll move through these last two quickly. Next one comes to us. It's not really an article. It's it's actually a mortgage letter from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development focused on revisions to residency requirements. So reading through some of the highlights from this, the purpose and effective date. So updates FHA borrower residency requirements for FHA insured mortgages must be implemented for FHA case numbers assigned on or after May 25, 2025. So coming up here in just a couple months. Changes will later be incorporated into HUD's handbook. The scope and applicability applies to all FHA Title II single family forward mortgages and home equity conversion mortgages directed to a wide range of FHA participants, including mortgagees, underwriters, appraisers, title lenders, and so on. So the key policy changes in this, number one, elimination of non-permanent resident eligibility, removes all provisions that allowed non-permanent residents to qualify for FHA insured financing, emphasizes that only U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, and citizens of Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, and Palau are eligible. Updated documentation requirements. So borrowers must now provide explicit evidence of lawful permanent resident status or citizenship for those from Micronesia, Marshall Islands, or Palau. A social security card is no longer sufficient to verify immigration or work status. Then it also adjusts adjustments to streamline refinance procedures, deletes non-credit qualifying exemptions, and updates special documentation requirements for streamline refinances. The rationale behind this is that the changes align FHA's policies with recent executive actions that aim to reserve federal benefits and protect the financial interests of U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents, ensures borrowers have stable residency and employment critical for sustaining long-term financial obligations. Any thoughts on this, Charles?
I think this one is an indication of more to come. So my expectation would be that Fannie Mae will have some type of change in their requirements. It hasn't been released yet, at least not that I know of, but I'm expecting that to happen in the next few weeks. That is going to affect the ability for some people to get new mortgages. That will affect new home sales. So it's just something we need to pay very close attention to. I think it affects a lot of people that are listening. So this is just one element. I think there's probably more to come. And some of those changes probably were needed. I don't know that all of it's necessary, but it is going to have an impact. So there is going to be a lot of focus on housing, and I think we're going to pay really close attention to this one. If Fannie Mae does in fact release something in the next couple of weeks, it'll be a big topic for us to talk about.
Yeah. So continuing on this topic a little bit related to mortgages. So I think some of you probably came across Patrick Bet-David's tweet that he had where he said 6.1 million Americans are behind on their mortgage. And then the chart is specific to multifamily delinquency. So he basically referenced the 6.1 million Americans being behind on their mortgages. And then he shows a chart that is not even related to single family or mortgages. It's related to multifamily delinquency. And so this went pretty viral. As of the time that I pulled this clip, I think there were over 1.1 million. Yeah. And it wasn't just hit. I mean, people were taking this and posting it everywhere else as their own.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we wanted to bring this up because I wanted to also show a graph of the actual delinquency of single family mortgages, because what this shows here, it's misleading because this doesn't have anything to do with single family. So this chart that I'm going to show here now comes to us from, it's basically, the title of it is Total Seriously Delinquent Loans by Loan Type. And so it shows VA, conventional, and FHA loans. And so as you can see on this graph, for those of you who are watching and those of you who are not watching, I'll describe it for you. But essentially, it goes from 2005 all the way up to the end of 2024. And you'll see, of course, a big uptick during the 2008, 2009 housing collapse. And then it goes back up, a huge spike around the time of COVID in 2020 and 2021. But since then has steadily come back down. And even toward the end of 2024, there was a small uptick in each of the different loan types. So for the VA loan types, there was an uptick from 2.07% to 2.26%. Conventional loans uptick from 1.04% to 1.09%. and FHA loans an uptick from 3.17% to 3.63%. So you don't really see the big hockey stick curve or like the big uptick to the right like you did in the other. Now, they all did move up slightly, so that could be something for us to continue watching. But I think it just shows that that post was a little misleading from Patrick Bet-David.
Yeah, because he is posting the delinquency from apartment complex owners, which
Right.
we know we've been predicting this for a while. So deals that were acquired over the last couple of years, they bought them at too low of a cap rate. Rents now are not increasing at the rate that they were. They can't cover the debt in some cases. Yeah, so this is a known thing in the space, but not related to single family in hardly any way. That's a very tough one to tie together. So I think this is a much better chart. There is a little bit of an uptick, but not anything. They were, I think what people were saying with the post that Patrick did in that graph, like, oh, brace for impact. We're about to see a crash. But that's not, and if that's the case, that was the wrong data to use. So
Right.
very, very odd. It just seemed very clickbait-ish, which is not typically how he operates. So I don't know the methodology
Agreed.
or it just doesn't make sense to me why they would do that. Maybe it was just misunderstood for some reason, but this is much better data, and it doesn't look like we have some massive problem yet. But we'll watch it because we want to understand this data. And if this goes up, you see the uptick at end of 24. If this goes up and we see it Q1 of 25, it's continuing to go up. Now this is something we want to pay a little bit of attention to.
Yep. All right, well, let's move on to the third and final headline here. So this one comes to us from Globe Street. The headline reads, multifamily market moves toward balance as supply-demand gap narrows. So reading from this article, absorption of apartment units in the United States has climbed 35% to start 2025. That's the first 3 months of the year compared to the same quarter 12 months prior. But for the fourth year in a row, more supply entered the market than was rented, though the vacancy rate held steady. Apartment.com's multifamily rent report for Q1 2025 showed asking rent grew by 1.1%, the same rate as in the previous quarter. Rent per unit increased to $1,754 compared to $1,735 in Q1 2024, and 137,750 apartments were absorbed. But in the same quarter last year, 140,950 new ones were delivered. However, the gap between supply and demand has narrowed for each of the past 5 quarters as the market moves toward more balanced conditions, the report commented. Rent growth among the 50 markets studied was strongest in the Midwest, where 6 of the top 10 markets were asking rent growth are located and supply has been restrained. Kansas City led with an uptick of 3.5%. Other strong gainers were Chicago and Pittsburgh at 3.3%. In contrast, 9 of the 10 weakest performing markets for rent growth were located in the Sun Belt, where there is too much supply. Asking rents fell year over year in Austin, down 4.5%, Denver down 3.6%, Phoenix down 3.5%, and Tucson down 2%. Most units absorbed during the year were in the 4 and 5 star categories. However, since such luxury units were also in the highest supply, this segment experienced the weakest annual asking rent growth at 0.5%. In addition to the sector's woes, it also suffered an 11.4% vacancy rate. Mid-priced assets, however, saw rent increases of 1.4% and vacancy of 7.4% at the end of Q1 2025. What are your thoughts on this, Charles?
Yeah, we've seen this coming for a while, so this is not unexpected at all. We're seeing concessions. 2 months free rent is becoming a pretty common thing, even for renewing tenants, which is that's not something that you want. But it seems to be happening across the board. It's becoming much more common. Like to keep somebody there, you're going to have to give them 2 months free rent, or they'll just go somewhere else. So interesting scenario. We're seeing this in multifamily, and then a little bit in BTR in some locations as well. So all not shocking. We would expect this to happen, but conversely, we've got a whole bunch of stuff that was delivered, and then we're going to have a reduction in new supply just based on how challenging it was to finance deals in 23 and 24. So the things that will be coming online in 25 and 26 is going to be dramatically reduced. We're starting to see more deals funded now. So maybe end of 26, 27, we'll start to see, and into 28, we'll start to see an uptick. But there will be some rents being able to recover in 25 and 26 just based on the supply that's not going to be built. Maybe half the supply in some markets of what would normally be delivered in a given year.
Well, that brings us to an end here. I know we're a little longer than we normally are on these episodes, but that tariff topic was really important, and there was a lot of stuff to cover there. Any final thoughts, Charles, before we wrap up?
No, I think we're going to pay very close attention to all of these. The idea is that we're trying to find topics that are impactful to our listeners in their business. And so, if these are helpful to you and you're getting benefit, we would love to hear some feedback. If there's some topics you would love to hear us talk about and dig into a little bit more that we haven't, also, please let us know. We really want this to be beneficial, so you can come to us for a condensed version of the information and not have to go peruse the internet to find this on your own.
Exactly. Let us go and track the information down and everything, and give you the links to it and everything too, because, we're trying to provide the best information that we can. But again, we want to provide you with the information to be able to go and link to each of these articles and everything from different sources, and let you, make the best possible decision for your own business and own career, depending on where you're located. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, I appreciate you clicking that button. And if you haven't left us a rating and review on Apple or Spotify, that goes a long way in getting our show in front of more people. So thanks again for joining us today, and we will talk to you all next week.